before sunrise on a mild summer morning in June 1995. A 27-year-old television news anchor named Jodi hurriedly left her apartment in Mason City, Iowa, headed for work. But she never arrived, and her disappearance has never been solved. In 2003, two television news reporters created FindJodi.com, a website dedicated to preserving Jodi's memory and keeping her case alive. This is the official Find Jodi podcast.
Let me ask you this, Josh. When you're asked what you think happened, like if you're introducing someone to the case for the first time, or when somebody asks you, what do you guys think happened? What's Find Jodi think happened? What's your response to that?
I never give an answer because if you look at in TV news, for instance, we've always had to be, unbiased. We couldn't take a position on anything. And I've always grown to kind of maintain that outlook. And when it comes to this case, there's no official suspect on record. So to say so-and-so did it, or to say this group of people did it, would be, inappropriate because there's no proof of it. So I've always took the stance that I never have told people who I thought did it. But that's also interesting because my mind has changed several times over. Because I'll zero in on somebody who I think is pretty much the prime person of interest, and I'll take a look at all the work we've done over the years and say, boy, this really adds up. This has got to be it. But then we've covered so many leads, and then comes along another lead that really gets me, and we'll spend weeks on it, and it'll completely change my mind. Temporarily, but it'll change my mind because we'll look at what we have, we'll compare it to what we've seen, and then my mind's really mixed up because, this was never introduced before, or this doesn't add up. So it's a constant struggle for myself even to try to figure it out. I have suspicion of 1 to 2 people who I think are pretty much my persons of interest at this point. But again, that could change because we're unraveling new stuff even this many years later. And so I expect it to change unless we still really start narrowing down and nailing down some of that info to strengthen the position.
And Caroline, kind of same question to you. And people, when you get that question, when we all get that question, they want to hear like a name or at least a reason for why it hasn't been solved. And you can't really give one for the reasons Josh mentioned and for the reasons that you brought up in the past on the site. For all we know, it could be someone we've never heard of.
Right. My answer nowadays pretty much is none of the above. I've seen too many times where it appeared to be something, appeared to be the main person, and it turned out not to be. So until we see the evidence, I think we have to stick with none of the above. We don't know. People often ask us too, what's our theory about what happened? And we just don't know. It's sometimes, it's an obvious, say, a robbery that took a terrible turn, or a sexual assault that clearly took a turn and the person was murdered. But we don't have eyewitnesses, so little physical evidence. We don't have a body. We don't have Jodi. So I told somebody recently, I can't think of a tougher case I've ever worked on. So therefore, and that feeds into the whole thing about who did it. Since we don't know about what happened, we don't know a motive, it's really hard to know who did it.
Is it fair, though, to go so far as to say, A, she was abducted, and B, Jodi is deceased?
Yeah, I would say that's fair because look at what we have in the parking lot, the drag marks, the bent key, things of that nature. I've always looked at it as an abduction. Enough evidence is there to show that something happened in that parking lot. I mean, she just didn't go along with somebody in agreement and say so long. There was a struggle there, and it's based on what we see in the pictures, based on what police have said, based on what people may or may not have heard. So I'm pretty sure about the fact that, something happened in that parking lot that she wasn't approving.
Totally. I don't think it was a stage scene by Jodi in any way. I think she was clearly abducted.
Josh, this one's for you as the co-founder of the group. And I'm sure you've thought about this over the years, but we were recently asked, have we considered a GoFundMe or some kind of crowdsourcing reward that could be used?
We have in the past. As far as fundraising has gone in the past, early on, I'll just give you a little timeline. When we first did the Who's in Truth file back in 2002 or 2003, We worked for Hubbard Broadcasting at KAAL TV. And they were really good in the fact that they supported us to not only do the series, but then they put about $10,000 up for a reward right out of the gate. So this was something we could promote on the air and say, hey, look, here's the series, here's what we're trying to do, and by the way, here's a reward to try to entice somebody to come forward. And that reward stuck for a while. I mean, it was probably there for a year or two, and it just kind of fizzled out, and obviously nothing has happened since then. But then we started just taking donations on the website through Fundly, which is a site that we use for, PayPal donations, or actually through that, not PayPal donations, but through the Fundly page. You can go to our FindJodi.com/donate page, and a lot of people donate that way. I wouldn't say a lot, some people do. And we also take funds through PayPal, or you can mail us a check. That's what's happened over the years. We have considered GoFundMe, but when you do that, you start to get into what do people get in return? You can get funds that way and grow it and give it away as a reward. And we've kicked that idea around. We wanted to change our entity before we did any of that. Before we had an organization set up, now it is a strong nonprofit. We had to restructure the whole organization. So that paperwork has been done, worked with an attorney to get that done. And so now when you want to donate to the site, you can do so. And it's tax-exempt donation. As of GoFundMe, it's still an option for us. We definitely need the money. We're a small group, and donations are much appreciated. We don't get a lot of them. We have one donor who really helps us out each year with a $5,000 donation, and that you can believe that goes a very long way for this small group. So, but money dries up pretty quickly. So. We're all ideas are on the table for that, so I'm glad you brought that up. Something we could probably look into.
And the entity, I'm not sure if we've brought it up in the past, but I'm not sure if people have noticed, but like, for example, the Facebook page is now FindJodi Inc., and that's not us changing, obviously, to a for-profit status. It's just a designation, right?
Yeah, because to be totally honest, back when I started this thing, I was in my early 20s, and I think, we tossed it together, they got the paperwork together, and some of the forms weren't totally buttoned up. It was like, okay, well, we have a nonprofit, but it's not complete. So it was FindJodi Com Inc. Back then. So now it's just FindJodi Inc. And the proper paperwork's been filed with the state and the federal and everything else. So we're good to go now.
I was going to mention that one of the key things about the donations, we've been able to do things like the billboards, which has had such a multiple effect. That billboard generated a lot of national attention, and it keeps Jodi visible in Mason City. So that's a real tangible example of where a donation can make a difference and help to keep Jodi out there. We can do our part. We can use social media. Our time is all donated, but sometimes you need to buy things like billboards, and that's where donations help us a lot.
We just re-upped that billboard for the year. So we have one in Mason City right now. We used to have four actually, but now we have one that's going to stay for a while.
Back to the case. Why is this one so hard to solve?
Well, if it was 2021 and it happened like yesterday, I think it would be solved already.
Yeah.
Obviously, because cameras are everywhere. People are more attentive. They know what to look for. They can respond quicker. Social media. I mean, everybody's talking. You're getting a stream of information nonstop. In 1995, I mean, think back how far that was. There's just nothing really to work with. And that's what's frustrating. And it's the middle of the night. It's 4 a.m. and it's, we talk about people, what did they hear? And the challenge for us now is this many years later, trying to get them to remember something. I mean, do you even remember what happened a week ago, Wednesday?
Right.
I even have a hard time with that. But to think about what happened 26 years ago on that morning, did you see something? Did you hear? What did you hear? And people get their stories mixed up. That's what's frustrating. So trying to keep the facts straight, I think, is one of the biggest challenges at this point. And at the time, just the investigation, just what people thought they knew or what they heard, it just, things didn't all come together to solve that crime quickly. And I think when you have a missing person case, you only have so many minutes and so many hours to really get the information you need to crack the case.
And from the beginning, the case had a huge challenge, the fact that there were no eyewitnesses, there were no surveillance video, and there was 3 hours that whoever took Jodi got away with before the case was even reported. So I can't imagine a case where more things were went wrong, weren't there, that could have helped solve the case. Physical evidence at the scene is so limited. We're told that there's a partial palm print, and as of a couple of years ago, we understand it had not been identified because we know police were seeking a copy of John Van Sice, Jodi's friend's palm print. But I've talked to people, friends of Jodi's, who've been in her car, and they've never been asked for a print. So we don't know if it's important or not. There have been reports of blood evidence over the year, but the police have said, no, there was no blood at the scene. So again, your options for potential DNA aren't there. It's
tough. Caroline, we went back and forth on that. Remember, for years, was there blood at the scene? That was always a big challenge to figure out, who's saying that, where's that coming from? Is it true? Is it not true? That's one we worked on for a long time.
And
but
that's
the partial palm print, partial palm print was very important to the case for a long time. I remember, when we talked to Lieutenant Vanderweerd back in, it had to be 2004 or 2005 maybe, comparing that print with, sex offenders at the time like Thomas Korsgaden, who we really did a follow-up on in the Huisentrude file, and they took a palm print and they compared it to Korsgaden, and it wasn't a match. And we have an interview with the lieutenant talking about that. But I remember taking that and trying to figure out, all right, how can we apply this print to as many people as possible? And that was a really slow process.
So we don't know to this day if that print, one, has been identified. Is it Jodi's? Is it relevant? We just don't know. And Josh mentioned the witnesses forgetting, not only are not remembering, a lot of the witnesses we've gone back to, people who lived at the key building, apartments where Jodi lived, are gone. They're dead.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
we've tried to circle back. And one witness I reached out to about a month ago doesn't remember something that she supposedly told a friend. And the only way I was able to confirm that she actually said it is I found a copy of a letter this friend had written to Jodi's mom about the same thing. So that just shows you what your mind can do to you
Right.
26, almost 27 years later.
Right.
Just run through some specifics, some smaller questions on the case. Did Jodi always live in that apartment in the complex? And along those lines, Caroline, when did Jodi first move to Mason City?
We understand Jodi moved to Mason City in November 1993 when she was hired by KIMT to be the morning anchor. So as far as we know, Jodi lived in that apartment building, that specific apartment, the entire time she was in Mason City.
We got a question about the scene itself, and it's been photographed and videoed over the years, but it's kind of a difficult place to describe in that parking lot. But we've all been there. Josh, you were there many times. The question is, was the abduction really within view of anyone, or is it more hidden? So how would you describe where Jodi's car was in that bowl of the parking lot?
I would think it would be right up on the front stage. I mean, I think where it happened, we paced it off from the door she would come out of to her car, and it wasn't that many paces, probably 10 to 12, maybe 15 paces from the door. So when you drive in there, it's kind of a horseshoe shape. You drive in on the right side and you drive around to the left, and then you exit the same way you came in. She was on the kind of the final turn down on the far side on the left side. So that's where the entrance to the one building on the left would be. And she came out of that door, and her Mazda Miata was there, and kind of in between the vehicles out into the parking lot is where it happened. And I would think, I mean, all of the apartments have a view, especially the building on the left, have a view of that area.
Yeah.
But it's past 4 a.m, so it's, unless you're sound asleep, unless you're up and you're not sleeping, either you hear something, or if you happen to look out the window, I mean, I think you'd see a car pull out of there, or a truck or a van. It's not like it's hidden away from sight.
No, I'd say it'd be visible for half of the units, the parking lot facing units on Building C. And then there's the 2 other buildings too, and a handful of those windows would have been able to see, possibly.
Yeah, the second floor, sure.
Yeah, and speaking of the parking lot, one of the things that's always surprised me is that Jodi's personal items, her shoes, her blow dryer, earrings were scattered about. Nobody seemed to notice that, or didn't seem to get anybody's radar that morning. They were all still there when the police showed up at 7:16.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to people are way more aware now, Caroline, to that point. Like, think about that. Back then, people just kind of minded their business, I think, especially in the Midwest. People don't want to make things their business in the Midwest. I'm from Minnesota, and I always felt that growing up. And I've moved around since then a lot. And now I think in this day and age, just people are so hyper aware of what's going on around them. They still don't want to interfere with things, but I think almost when something happens, and everybody has a cell phone now, everybody's kind of aware that, hey, if I'm watching this, I'm either recording this or I'm getting somebody or I'm, looking into what's going on and totally not oblivious to my surroundings.
I think there's something insular to apartment living too, which is kind of strange because if you live on a street, chances are you know your neighbors. But if you live in an apartment, you may not know the person that lives 3 doors down.
Right.
You kind of keep to yourself along those lines too. This was an interesting question. I'm not sure if it's relevant, but was Jodi's car locked? Do we know when the police arrived?
Well, I would assume it was because
she was
the key
unlocking
benched,
it.
so she was unlocking it, and she never got it unlocked, so it would have been locked.
That's my assumption too. But I'm not sure if we've ever heard that definitively. Again, not
No,
that
that's a good question.
Yeah.
But what would that matter in terms of if somebody would have gone in there?
Right. Probably not relevant, I would think. But somebody asked it, and I thought,
It's a great
I'm not
question,
sure.
though. I mean, I feel like we've heard them all, so these are great.
And that helps us because so much of what I read in comments and other podcasts are just repeat stuff or people going off. But to hear something fresh, it could be a fresh idea like this that could lead to something.
Sure.
And for those listening, that's a great point. If you can think up great questions like that, we've been going over a lot of the same stuff for years, as Caroline mentioned. So by all means, send them to team@FindJodi.com.
Did Jodi? I'm not sure where this question's coming from. If it's a rumor somebody heard or something like that. But did Jodi's relatives stay in her apartment shortly afterwards, or maybe did anyone that we know of go in the apartment after? Kind of what's the timeline of the apartment after the fact?
Well, the family members cleaned it out, right, Caroline?
Correct. And
we actually have video of that.
Exactly. We've seen that, and we saw a news crew was allowed in there. WCCO was allowed in there within a couple months after Jodi disappeared. Amy Coons mentioned being brought into the apartment by the detectives to look at the clothes, to look if anything was that she might recognize. So a number of people have been in the apartment since Jodi disappeared.
I want to say it was like an aunt or somebody who went in to clean out with her sister. Don't quote me, but it was family members who went in. I remember they were taking her clothes out of the closet and bringing it into the car.
This is good for both of you because it goes back forever. The supposed beer cans and bottles in the sink. The question is, were they tested for handprints or DNA? But I think we should bring up, do we remember where that lead came from and how reliable is it that there were actually beer cans or bottles in the sink?
I think I first heard of that from Jim Feldhaus, who worked on this case for a long time before he passed away. Gary Peterson and I, when we first started, came in contact with Jim Feldhaus, who lived out in South Dakota, and he was a private investigator type, and he was really focused on this case, and he had a ton of information, a lot of it unsubstantiated, but a lot of it very intriguing. And he would constantly feed us stuff over the years through email, and he would do long summaries of, persons of interest or situations, such as this, like here's how the apartment was, and there was 2 cans of 16 ounce. He said 16 ounce Budweiser Light. I remember him saying that. 2 16-ounce cans of Budweiser Light, so the shotgun cans or the bigger cans. And they were tipped upside down. And I remember that vividly. I'm like, oh, how do you know that? And so that's where I remember it first starting. Could have been earlier than that, but I mean, as far as my mind goes back. But over the years, bottles and then cans, and were they cleaned out? Was Jodi clean enough to just rinse them out? So many things about these bottles and cans. But that was another one. That's another thing that kind of sent us down a spiral for a long time.
Well, and I've talked many, many times over the years to Rose Tobin, who was the apartment manager at the Key building when Jodi lived there. And she's the one who let the police officer go in the scene into Jodi's apartment to do the welfare check. She has consistently said she never saw anything like that in the sink. She said that Jodi's apartment was immaculate. Her covers were pulled up. A lot of what people have seen later on and commented on were things they saw in video, including the stuff when WCCO went in.
Right.
And I think they combine that thinking it's crime scene video with we don't know what what was there. So the best answer we can give you, I think, is we don't know if there were cans or bottles in the sink at the time.
Same with the toilet seat. Was the toilet seat up or was it down? And if it was up, then there must have been a male. And I mean, that was the whole thinking of the whole for years. The toilet seat was up, so that means somebody was in her apartment because she would never have left it up, according to several people. That was one of those things that, don't have a firm idea on if it was or not.
Well, Frank Stearns, the former investigator in the case, is quoted in one of the TV network crime shows as saying it was up, and that, the same thing you're saying, Josh, was intriguing. But we don't know when it went up. Could it have been one of the investigators, one of the officers on the scene?
Did somebody use the bathroom?
We don't know how it put it up. Yeah.
Now, you would never, if it's an active crime scene, you would never, I would imagine you'd never use the bathroom
You would think
as an
not.
investigator. You would never even go in there and mess around, but who knows?
And just quickly on the beer cans, that's not to be confused with the beer cans that some people that Caroline has talked to say they saw outside by the dumpster. Right.
Right. Correct.
Another question I never thought of before, but I thought, an interesting question. Do we know to that wedding that she was to go back to in Minnesota that weekend, was she going to bring anybody, a plus one?
I've never heard that she was, and Josh, feel free to jump in.
No.
I know she was in the wedding party, but I've never heard that she was planning on bringing a date.
Okay.
We're finding that her personal life was pretty personal. We don't have a ton of, we're getting more information about who she was hanging out with and connected to. But yeah, that's a good question, because she did a lot of things on her own, but we're also finding out she had relationships that we're learning about. So it's a good question.
And many of her friends in Minnesota were not aware of people she'd been dating, say, in Iowa. And typically, from what we found out, she may have dated 2 or 3 times. There didn't seem to be anybody significant in her life during the last few years, unlike in high school and college when she dated the same friend in Long Prairie all those years.
I think that's an unusual aspect of this case, because homicide cases, missing person cases like this usually reveal secrets about people, about various people. But in terms of Jodi, she's still kind of enigmatic with what you would think a typical person her age in her time in life would be doing. The best we can tell, like Caroline just said, she went on dates, but she wasn't dating anyone.
And one of the things that's come up along those lines is her surprise birthday party that was 2.5 weeks before she disappeared. What was interesting about that party is there were no friends from KIMT. None of her Minnesota friends were there. It was basically a party of her, say, a cell group of friends she had in Mason City. Ani Cruz, her good friend that she hung out with almost every day. John Van Sice, her friend, one of the people who co-hosted the party. But none of the people at work, which working at a TV station, and Josh, I'm sure you've had the same experience, those people tend to go to those parties. So I thought it was interesting that they were not at the birthday party.
And, I think it's a very important note, too, that sometimes we get so caught up with, hyper analyzing everything that she did. And then when I look back, and Caroline, maybe you too, or anybody in the TV business looks back in their 20s, how you lived your life. I mean, it was good time. We liked to hang out. We liked to hang out with people. We weren't, I was always told, don't get serious too early in a relationship, live your life, have a good time, and I find a lot of times people are so hyper focused on, well, Jodi had a beer, or she was drinking. Maybe she had a problem, or she was hyper. Maybe she was on drugs. No, I mean, she was in her 20s. She was in TV. She just landed a great gig. And I remember being that age. And I remember, at the time I was in southern Minnesota, and it was one of the best times of my life. I mean, it was the middle of a cornfield, but boy, you look back on that, and that was a lot of fun. And we did a lot of wild stuff and had a great time. So I think that's important to remember when we go down through this case, to not hyperanalyze everything and think that everything has a reason for it. As you just have to let the young adults be that age. And we got to remember she was really young at that time.
I think the lack of answers contributes to that. The
Sure.
people are trying to invent
100%.
their own scenarios. And so they go, what about this? I mean, we've been through some of that ourselves, but you're right, Josh. I think it's so important to get the view from much higher up, to take a step back.
I think that's where the drugs come from, because there's no indication from anybody that I've ever heard that she had any kind of a drug problem or even used recreationally. But there has to be an explanation for this, and so, people start to speculate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and one of our challenges is the whole thing is to get to know the victim. And as we've gotten to know our friends, people always say very positive things when somebody disappears, but even diving deeper with those who knew her best, I feel convinced enough from the people I've talked to and deep off the record, there was nothing going on. There's not a part of her life that they're covering to portray her differently than she was.
And this is a question.
Because under this kind of analysis, usually that starts to unfold.
Exactly.
You start to see cracks in the armor, and you start to say, okay, well, there's something we never knew, and now people are starting to open up about it.
Right.
Right.
We got a couple questions about John Van Cise. How did they meet, Jodi and John?
It's often been reported that they met at the Key Apartments because Jodi moved there, as we said, November 1993. John Van Cise moved in there many months later. He was not living there at the time. He had moved on when Jodi disappeared. But from talking to one of Jodi's closest friends, she told me that they had met when she and Jodi were at the OP, the Other Place bar where people hung out in Mason City, and they were introduced by a friend of John's, a businessman named Alden Stecker. Don't know anything more than that. That just seems like they were probably hanging out at the OP. Mm-hmm. Josh, have you heard anything differently? Or
Nope, that's pretty accurate.
Was Van Cise's boat actually named Jodi?
Yes.
In the sense of...
no. Yes and no.
Right.
Yes, it was named Jodi. There's no indication the name was ever actually on the boat.
Correct.
Right. So I think we need to distinguish between, say, the boats that Josh sees down in his part of the world that are named and registered and all that.
Right.
But this is I think it's like a 22-foot ski boat. And
right.
We've seen that it does not on the back of the boat have Jodi written on it. So probably an unofficial. He himself.
He said it.
Right. So
and Jodi supposedly told friends that as well, but it was just like she named her car. But nothing. Her car didn't have a name on it per se.
Exactly. So the boat has a name, according to John. I named my boat after Jodi, but it doesn't have the name on the back that typically boats have. If that makes sense.
And 48 Hours had video of it from when they interviewed John Van Cise not long after she disappeared. No question, if Jodi's name were on that boat, that would have been their opening shot, I would think, in any story.
Also, how did he haul that boat around?
I mean, the video that we saw of him cleaning it or jumping into it, I think America's Most Wanted had an interview with him, and he's in there cleaning it out. And I think he towed it with his minivan. I think he had an Astro van.
Right.
That's my guess too, with a hitch on the back.
Yep.
Which he had just taken up to when they went water skiing that weekend before Jodi disappeared. Jodi and Ani Cruz and John Van Cise had driven to Iowa City with the van and the boat, I believe.
What do we know about the hair that was collected from the scene? I think all we know is that it's been stated by police that they found a hair, and they didn't say where. They didn't even say inside or outside of the car, inside or outside the apartment for that matter. But that they found a hair that they've kind of disclosed as part of the possible pile of physical evidence.
Right, and that the only time I've seen that publicly is, I believe, Frank Stearns, a former investigator, said it on a Nancy Grace show years ago.
Yeah.
Many years ago. And then when the follow-up question was there a root to the hair, and he would not answer because that would have been a root. It gives you a lot more possibilities potentially for DNA, but he would not say anything. And I haven't seen any other reference to that hair in any other interviews police have done.
And when you say that, I think of this instance. Gary and I were out with a psychic years later, Robert Baca, I think his name was. And I remember he was walking through the parking lot, and he went down underneath a parking block, one of the parking cement blocks, and found a hair. And he grabbed it. He's like, there could be something here. I'm like, wow, how many years later are we talking? It's probably from my head. Who knows?
Oh, my goodness.
But that's just funny you bring that up, because those are memories I remember that start popping back in.
Along the lines of psychics, this is like a lot of unsolved cases, long unsolved cases. This is something that Jodi's case has seen. And I remember early on, I think Jodi's family even participated in a televised program, like a panel of psychics.
Yep.
So it's been a part of the case. What influence do you think psychics have had on this case or investigation? What use might they have provided?
Two things I think stand out. First off, if it wasn't for a psychic, we wouldn't be this far down the line. And that's because it's what started Gary and I on the case. And I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of psychics. I apologize if you take offense to that, but I'll tell you why. First off, though, I have to give them credit because we received a mailing at the TV station right about the time we started looking into these cases. First of all, there was a bunch of missing male college students at the time, and that's when Gary and I first realized we were both very interested in cases because we started tracking this. We thought we had a serial killer. And while we were working on that at the time, we got this letter. Gary did, actually, from a guy in California, a psychic, who said, hey, I will give you a free reading on any case that you want me to take a look at. So he said, well, Jodi's case is one of the biggest. So he sent it back, says, here's the case, take a look. He sends him back a 3 or 4 page letter that breaks down details about where Jodi could be and what had happened. So that kind of started the goose chase for us to go down through the Midwest and to stop by all these, Honey Lake and Iowa City, and trying to follow this treasure trove map of where he thinks things happened. And we went and checked them all out. Didn't gain a whole lot of information, but along the way had a lot of great interviews. And boy, that jump started the whole case. And that's what transitioned into actually digging into the case and putting together the Who's in Truth file. So hats off to that guy who sent us that letter, because maybe we wouldn't even have started. Maybe we would have just stopped it there, or never even picked up the case and started working on it. So hats off to the psychics for getting us moving on it. But since then, it's, I would say 40 to 50, maybe 40% of the communication we get to the site is psychic in nature. And so while I appreciate what people send in and the visions they have and the things that, they feel and whatnot, at first I was super excited. I followed everything they said, but when you keep coming up with dead ends, because these are hunches, or these are visions, or these are things that can't be substantiated necessarily, it got frustrating over the first few years to see one now that comes in saying, well, I had a vision last night that she's in, a ditch in southern Minnesota. Well, that doesn't do us much good, because there's really what ditch, where, why, what. So when I see that, it's a little frustrating, but people are still talking about the case. So, I appreciate all of that. But I think a big chunk of the communication now still comes from psychics.
One of the investigators I work with a lot in another state told me he doesn't dismiss any of them, just because you never know if it's someone saying they're having a psychic moment or thinking of when in fact it might be a way they're trying to point law enforcement in the right direction.
Sure.
Someone who's not a psychic but actually knows of something and trying to find it that way.
And it can also bring a fresh perspective, psychic in nature or not.
I think the bigger question is, do you believe that psychics can actually deliver on their visions?
Right.
Or do you think they can solve crimes? And I think they can. I think there are certain people out there who have these powers that all of us don't have, that can actually aid in solving crimes.
There have been a couple of cases where the information that's given that ends up being pretty accurate is pretty amazing. But I have a kind of a larger problem in this case too. But when a case reaches a certain point and the family is in this desperate state, psychics can sometimes latch on to that and take the family for a ride or give them false hope. So I have a problem with that part of it. Like, if you're a psychic and you want to reach out to somebody, go to the police. Don't go to the family, for example.
Right.
Like the Jacob Wetterling case. Caroline, you'd remember Jacob's dad got kind of lost along those lines because of a particular psychic for a long time.
And I've talked with a number of psychics over the years, and I've spent quite a bit of time with one on Jacob and some others. And what's interesting is I can't remember with two of them having the same reading, the same sense. So,
kind of along the lines of the communications that come in over the years, another often communicated tip to us, I think, is, have you looked into X, Y, or Z serial killer?
I think that's relevant because, if somebody's just passing by and has a history of a serial killer, you have to take that seriously, because there's been certain cases, and I don't know the names right off the top of my head, of certain lower profile serial killers that have come through. Maybe they were truck drivers, or maybe they were, but what's fascinating is people will actually point out, look at the 3 women he murdered. They look eerily similar to Jodi. Right. And so we've had several of those where I didn't even know who the guy was, and they showed me pictures of the victims, and it's chilling because, Jodi could have easily fit that profile and been one of the victims in that situation. So those, I think, that we do get a lot of those. Not a lot, but we do get some that are very detailed, and I appreciate those coming in, because sometimes it's, like I said, we don't know who those people are, the serial killers themselves, but when you take a look at their track record, there's some eerie similarities there that should be looked at. And we've looked at several in the past.
Well, and Jodi was not a crime of opportunity. I think just about everybody agrees. Somebody was waiting for her, which doesn't discount a serial killer necessarily, but...
Right.
Scott, we had one just a couple months ago that I'll say I was excited when I first saw it. It was about a convicted killer out in the Midwest who went to Civil War reenactments. And you remember there was a Civil War reenactment going on right behind the Key Apartments the weekend before Jodi disappeared. It took me about 2 minutes of a Google search, though, to find out he was in prison at the time. But there are a lot of things that said, take a look. And I appreciate somebody taking the time to bring it to our attention.
And a lot of times, like Caroline says, that's what we'll find. A quick search will say, this person's got an alibi or person's not even alive.
Right. When did John Van Cise, to the best that we know, when did he get possession of the videotape of the birthday party that he was involved in throwing for Jodi a couple of weeks before? John's the one that's come forward and said that Jodi was at my house the night before, Monday night, to watch the birthday tape. Do we know when and how he got that videotape?
Well, that's a good question, Scott, because there have been inconsistent reports that he had gotten the tape on Sunday, that he had shown it to Jodi on Sunday. But in talking with a person who saw John Van Cise about 5:30 on Monday night, the day before Jodi disappeared, that person said John Van Cise came into the OP bar in Mason City and said he had just gotten the tape and he wanted to show it to them that night. So the best we know is he got it that Monday, and that if they saw it, they would have watched it that Monday night.
I guess we can say we know for sure that he has it on Tuesday morning, because I guess we can't say for 1,000% sure, but he, according to a couple of people we've interviewed who were at the scene, he showed up at the scene. He said he had the tape. Police asked him to go get the tape. He did. He brought it to police, and that's how police got the tape.
Correct. That doesn't seem to be in any kind of dispute. We know the police got it. We know a few people were asked to look at the video over the years and at the time, but it appears that he got it that Monday. They said there have been reports that he got it Sunday, but from the best we can narrow down from talking to somebody who talked with him Monday, he got it that Monday while Jodi was still at the golf tournament at the Mason City Country Club.
Right.
So the big question is, did she go over that night? Did Jodi go over to his apartment, his duplex that night, and watch the video from the June 10th party? Because
we've never found any corroborating information outside of Van Cise that Jodi was at his house, which doesn't say anything one way or the other. He's the one that says she was there, but nobody else sees her there. So it's always been kind of a question, was she even there that night?
And the couple who lived downstairs were not there at the time.
Right.
There are some people who live there, so we don't know. But we do know that it appears he got the video that Monday, and that he claims that he showed Jodi the video that evening at his apartment.
And the other thing that we've discovered kind of surrounding the birthday videotape is when that tape was broadcast, portions of it, about 1.5 years ago on the Oxygen Network, we posted some of the stills asking people on Facebook if they recognized anybody, trying to identify as many people as we could from the part of the video that had been made public at that point. And we were able to identify a handful of people with the help of our sources and with the help of the audience. We spoke to one of those people who was on the birthday video, and we now know, according to them, they were at the Key Apartments on Monday night. And they were there intermittently through the evening, and they were there after midnight, but say they left prior to 4 in the morning or so, when the abduction would have happened. But there again, that was new to me. This is somebody who's at the apartment, who doesn't live at the apartment, who was there after midnight, hours before the abduction, and we're just now hearing about this 25 years later. And
we don't know what it means. We do know that
Right.
person was interviewed by police and was a good friend of Jodi's, but we don't know what it means.
Right. We earlier in the episode talked about the blood, and for years it was kind of rumored or misinformed that there might have been blood at the scene, and Frank Stearns said publicly that there was no blood found at the crime scene, which I think we've come to establish as a fact. But that's significant to me because Jodi is abducted in a way and maybe mortally harmed in a way right there at the scene that doesn't produce any blood. And there's only so many ways that you can do that. So I think the blood is telling of what kind of an abduction it might have been there in the parking lot, or what happened to her, the lack of blood, I should say.
It tells us there was not a huge fight, seemingly, even though things were scattered, that whoever took Jodi had the strength or force to overpower her pretty quickly and may well have knocked her unconscious or done something to make it so she couldn't resist. But clearly it was not a physical fight back and forth type of thing. from what we see at the scene.
We got a question about Jodi's purse. Was it ever found? And the question also is, did she carry cash with her? That does go back to, there are times I have to go back and kind of check, all right, what was found at the scene? Because not every item is included in every report. And the purse itself was never found. But then again, Jodi has a bag that was never found because she's got this TV bag with all her stuff in it.
We don't know. We don't know if they found a specific purse in her apartment that she typically used.
Right.
Typically when she went to work in the morning, she'd be carrying this tote bag. No indication that was found at the scene or found somewhere else. If it were found somewhere else, it's never been shared publicly. But it had to be somewhere. I can't imagine a scenario with Jodi rushing out to her car, carrying her heels, her blow dryer, her earrings, all of those things in her arms. She had to have been in some kind of a bag, perhaps still on her arm when the abductor took her away. I think the one I got just hit with again when we were in Ohio is, why can't they solve this? And I think the expectation is so high because we're hearing of all these breakthroughs with genealogy,
right.
DNA, and all that stuff, and years later, but we don't have that. That's just so frustrating. And I think it is as tough of a case when you think to no eyewitnesses.
Right. So without DNA, and they're solving cases that are 50 years old with DNA now, with familial DNA.
Well, look at Michelle Martinko. They had tons of blood all over her dress. That they went back and they didn't get it the first time around, but they tested and they found it. So we don't have a bloody dress with Jodi.
Right. That's come up a lot on the site comments quite a bit. The Michelle Martinko case and Jerry Burns. I think it's worth reminding people of something that you pointed out to the team. That back to that case when Jerry Burns was arrested in December of 2018. He mentioned once the case went to trial and the interrogation audio came out, the video, he mentions Jodi Huisentruit's name. And obviously that got people's attention for obvious reasons. But you pointed out to the team that the first airing of the 48 Hours episode, Find Jodi, had aired, 2 days before that?
3 days.
3 days?
He was arrested on a Tuesday, and 48 Hours had aired that Saturday night, and it had aired on the Cedar Rapids station. And in the days leading up to the 48 Hours show, the local station, the Cedar Rapids station, where Jodi had worked at one point, had done previews. So Jodi Huisentruit's case was very much in the media arena at that time.
Yeah.
Just days before he was arrested. And in a previous podcast, and we interviewed the main detective on the case, and he said that caught their attention. Mason City police did call and chat with them a bit about how they solved their case, but they could not find any connection whatsoever with Jerry Burns, Jodi, Mason City, but it was looked at, but they believe it was just something where he was trying to he was nervous, trying to distract perhaps from what was going on, why they were there to interview him.
Sure. Okay. Well, we all want to say thank you to the audience for providing those questions and the feedback on the podcast episodes. Please keep those coming.
I just wanted to reach out to the viewers too while we have this, and the listeners, to just give a thanks for always listening to the podcast, coming to the website, sending in your ideas, your questions. This was a great episode to just talk about some of those questions, Scott, that you've been getting and the team's been getting. So I think this would be a good episode to have every few months, just to come back, circle back, and hit those big questions that we get often. I like the idea of a GoFundMe project. That's something we may look at. And if you have any ideas for fundraising, I'm always looking for ways we can raise funds just so we have them when we need them and expenses come up. We do have a donation page at FindJodi.com/donate. You can send a donation through Fundly, which is a donation website. You can send a donation through PayPal or a check through snail mail. All of it is appreciated no matter what amount. And we will get you a tax-exempt letter if you send over $25. So appreciate all the listeners out there. I think this podcast is going very well, and a great job to Scott and Caroline and the rest of the team. It's been a lot of work, but Scott, you've really led the charge on this podcast, so I appreciate all that you're doing and everybody else is doing. So let's just keep it up.